My only day this might be my only day this week. Up here. Mind if I? No, sure. This might be my only day this week. Yeah, absolutely.
Huh? Somewhere in chapter 7, I think. Actually, I think we're on text 27.
Yeah, I think 7:28. I think it's 28, chapter 7.
Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Sarvapakapamatam Dhatum Swatalankikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Dattarakam Shri Guru Vaishnava Shri Guru Sagajatam Sagatam Vidhatatam Sajivam Sarvaitam Sarvadutam Ayahasitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Krishna Padan Sahaganha Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha E Krishna Karuha Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namhostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindhan Vaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamhami Hari Priye Vancha Kapatahrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Hevacha Patitanham Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, reading from chapter 7, titled Knowledge of the Absolute, text 28. Ye shamantvanta gatam papam janhanam punyakarmanham te dhandva moha nirmukta vachante mam dridhavritaha. Translation. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, and who are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. Text 29. Jara maranham mokshayam ham hashritya yatanti he te brahma tad vidhu kritsnam hadyatmam karma chakilam. Translation. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental and fruitive activities. Text 30. Sadi bhuta didaivam ham sadi yagyam chaye vidu prayana kale pim chamham devatur yukta chetasaha. Translation: those who know me as the Supreme Lord, as the governing principle of the material manifestation, who know me as the one underlying all the demigods, and as the one sustaining all sacrifices, can with steadfast mind understand and know me even at the time of death. Text 1, Chapter 8, Attaining the Supreme. To text 7, Chapter 8. Arjuna uvacha kim tad brahma kim hadhyatmam kim karma purushottama haribhutam cha kim proktam haridaivam kim huchyate. Translation: Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the Self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Text 2. Adiyagya katam kotra dehesmin harusudana vayanakali cha katam gyeyosi niyatat mabihi. Translation: how does this Lord of Sacrifice live in the body? And in which part does he live, O Madhusudanam? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Text 3. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharham Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Dhyatmam Huchyate Bhutapavo Bhavakaro Visarga Karma Samgitaha. Translation: the Supreme Lord said, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called the Self. Action pertaining to the development of these material bodies is called karma, or fruitive activities. Text 4. Adibhutam kshatho bhava purushascha didaivatam adhiyagyo ham evatra dehe dehabritam vara. Translation: physical nature is known to be endlessly mutable. Is the cosmic Hare Krishna. The universe is the cosmic form of the Supreme Lord, and I am that Lord represented as a super soul dwelling in the heart of every embodied being. Text 5. Antakale chamham heva smarang muktva kalevaram yaprayati samhadbhavam yati nastyastra samshayaha. Translation: and whoever at the time of death quits his body remembering me alone at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. Text 6. Yam yam vapi smadhan bhavam tyajantyante kalevaram tam tam he vaiti kaunteya sadhad tad bhava bhavitaha. Translation: whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Text 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam hanusmara yudhyacha Mayar pitamanho buddhir mam evaishyasya samshayaha. Translation. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me, and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Okay, back to chapter 7, text 28. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhakti Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati. Devaki Nananaya Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Please seat, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Nice to see you. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you for being here. We'll go through the next 11 verses, starting with chapter 7, text 28, systematically reading the translation purports from His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Feel free to comment or make a question at any time as you feel so inspired. Reading the Sanskrit again from this verse 28. Yesham tvanta gatam papam janhanham punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta pachante ham dridha vritaha. Translation. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, and who are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. Purport. Those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. For those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish, and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously, and have conquered sinful reactions can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then gradually, they can meditate in trance on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness, in the association of pure devotees who can deliver one from delusion. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that if one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. All the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. The impersonalists do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law. Unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality or to be fully engaged in his transcendental loving service with determination. Hare Krishna. Lots of content in this purport. What makes Krishna consciousness special in comparison to every other religion is that it's the essence of religion. Externally, it might appear to be some sectarian tradition. You can easily get caught up in the dress and everything that comes with it. However, actually what it is at its core, at its essence, is the very principles of religion. And the principles of religion stand upon 4 items, which are truthfulness, compassion, austerity, and, anyone know? Purity. Mercy, that's kind of lumped in with compassion, usually, right? So corresponding to these principles of religion, well, there are rules and regulations to keep one abiding by such terms. So each principle of religion has a corresponding action that one must refrain from. So the purity is in regards to illicit sexual connection, be it subtle or gross. Essentially the idea to, or the desire, contaminated desire to enjoy separate from Krishna, or to exploit his own energy, right? And then there's compassion or mercy. This is the principle that's one can contain themselves from slipping into the inverse degree of mercy and compassion by watching what they eat, controlling their tongue, and specifically choosing not to eat meat, eggs, or fish. Because we can understand that as the human life is such a great position in comparison to the animal life, we must recognize that the animals, if they don't need to be killed, sure, there's the, Prabhupada says, it's the law of common sense, actually, that keeps us from killing and eating these animals. Understanding that if my human form of life is recognized as a greater position than the animals, then so they should also be recognized as on a higher platform than the plants. It's true that actually everywhere in the whole universe, expanding out in its totality, is filled with living entities. You can't escape that reality that there's living entities in the air that you breathe, in all the food that we eat. Actually, life is all around us. Everything is Brahman. Everything is spirit. That is there to a higher conception. So, the topmost yogi, the bhakti yogi, he recognizes this and he really values life to the highest degree, as he understands that that soul who is embodied in that form of life, he's actually an eternal servant of Krishna, simply in forgetfulness. So he's concerned with bringing people closer to Krishna, not elongating one's stay within this material world, which is what happens if we kill an animal. That animal has to come back and reassume life at that same material designation. So there's purity, compassion, austerity. This comes as a result from refraining from illicit substances, intoxicants, which I don't think I mentioned before, but that is in connection with this principle of austerity. And then there is, what's the last one? Austerity, compassion, purity. What's the last one? Do you remember? Truth. Yes. Yes. So these are the 4 principles of religion. And upon these 4 principles stands all sin: meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, right? Illicit intoxicants, all of these things. This is actually what all sin stands on. If you show me a man that's not engaged in any of these abominable activities, then actually he's to be considered sinless. So I challenge anyone here to try to think of a sinful activity that does not stand upon one of those 4 principles, because I'd be curious to see what you come up with. Anyone? So, it says, only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously and have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bringing ourselves to the mode of goodness, Sattva-gun, is considered the launch point into rising above the modes of material nature altogether. So very difficult is it, as we see in this purport, to make spiritual progress if one is involved in activities of the lower self, composed of heavy degrees of ignorance or passion, One must relatively lift themselves up out of those modes, those gunas, and find themselves situated in a pious position where they can render some sort of religious activity and begin to attain bits and bits of what's called sukriti, which is pretty much, by my understanding, mercy that's been accumulated, causeless mercy that's been accumulated in the appreciation that maybe you gave the devotees, in the glorification that you somehow or other rendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These can be examples of attaining some juice that opens one up for more devotional service. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. Ajit Prabhu, do you have a definition for that word, sukriti? Can you speak into the mic?
I think pretty much what you explained is the correct version. So, but what I was thinking is sometimes when you say Sukriti, it's about being blessed with the past good karma that eventually adds up and propels us forward and say in the devotional service what we're doing. So, for example, it's mentioned that those who have acted piously in their previous life will be able to take up devotional service easier. So that's like a trigger point which will help them progress forward.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, because within this material world, which is predominated by the three modes of material nature, there's a platform of religiousness, of irreligiousness, and a mix of the two. There's happiness, there's distress, and there's a mix of the two. Right? These are the qualities of the modes of material nature. So one must rise, lift themselves up to sattva gun, and in that way they can be somewhat peaceful enough to actually understand this higher knowledge of the soul. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. That means to meditate in trance in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness in the association of pure devotees who can deliver one from delusion. Just to reread a little bit of this purport. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that if one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. Recently I was listening to the effect of our association and how even in the material world you can understand its potency. For example, if you have like a stock trader, someone who works in the stock market, better he lives within the city limits, namely where the selling and trading, the selling, the buying is being done. It's true he can be somewhat successful even living out in the country, but he's going to miss out on so many opportunities. But if you're befriending those who are also buying and selling on that same market, then as soon as you need to buy something, you have access to it. As soon as you need to sell something, someone's interested. So like that. In the stock exchange of our devotional service, if I'm with devotees, present with the devotees, then when I need help, they're there for me. And when they're calling out, I can reach them. So this is the opportunity that we have. And it's true that living at the temple doesn't necessarily mean that one's even making advancement in devotional service or quickened advancement in devotional service. It's about the way he approaches. It's about the consciousness that he's carrying. One can be absorbed in the whole program, but just do it out of the sake of ritualistic activity. And we have to add the spirit to the ritual, and then it becomes spiritual. Otherwise, it's just ritual. Right? So this is actually referred to as niyamgraha, right? This is one of the 6 impediments, essentially, that Rupa Goswami gives in the Nectar of Instruction. Doing something just for the sake of doing it, not for the sake of actually wanting to advance or understanding why you're doing it. This is a yoga of love, it's an internal experience that we come to develop within ourselves, and as we do this program, we should deepen ourselves into it. This is something that some of my mentors have stressed onto me, is that we should always be going deeper in devotional service, whether that means understanding the song that we're singing. We're singing these songs and we come to memorize how they go, but do we really understand the meaning, and do we connect ourselves to that meaning? Does it make sense to us, and is it aligned with our interests that we see for ourselves? So there's always, in this life of a sadhaka, there's a bottomless pit that we can just continue to dive deeper into. And as we go deeper, we feel more relief from the material pangs of misery, which burn like fire. As we go deeper into this water hole, we find cooler and cooler water. Whereas trying to enjoy in the material sense of it all, it's akin to a very hot day of which you have very shallow water, and you're diving in head first, thinking that you'll enjoy, but actually what you do is you break your head, you break your neck. And you're not relieved by the water because it's warm water. It's right there on the surface of it all. So that's spoken about in 5th Canto Bhagavatam, I believe. So we need the association of the devotees, or we should assume that we do, at least. Reading Prabhupada's book, maybe for someone out there that's enough. I know for me it was just about enough to get me here, which was still pretty incredible given the low down position I found myself in the material world. It inspired me to give up everything pretty much immediately. There's a bit of a delay there as I studied by myself for a few weeks, but then I realized through a purport, a Bhaktivedanta purport that I read in 5th chapter, 1st canto, where Prabhupada is speaking about the place of pilgrimage for those who don't speak about the name, the form, the attributes of the Lord. That's right, yeah, that's just a place of pilgrimage for crows. And crows are attracted to very dirty places. They like trash, they like to hang around filthy areas. So in that purport, which is very powerful, pretty much my whole life changed, and Prabhupada stresses that essentially without the association of the devotees, we're finished. And that's what really inspired me to reach out to RVC at that moment. I just, I guess I believed Prabhupada as he was making his point. So, someone out there, maybe they can read Prabhupada's book and just become fixed in devotional service. It's possible, because Prabhupada's a pure devotee, and his words have such an incredible potency that I don't doubt that's possible. But for a rascal like myself, I need constant remembrance. I need to remind myself always why I'm here and how much I was suffering before I got here. Otherwise, I'm liable to just slip back into the same situation. And that happens first subtly, and then before we know it, that gains some momentum, and then we find ourselves away from the devotees before we know what happened. And that's a serious position to be in, of which there's no one, we call for help, there's no one there. Obviously Krishna is, always, and Prabhupada is through his books, but through the encouragement, the development of nice, loving friendship, we can actually come to free ourselves from this bondage of material misery. This is spoken about in the 11th canto. We're just gathering with the devotees to chant the holy name of the Lord. That is the most purifying process, and something as simple as that. Actually, no envy can live in such a setting. So, all the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. Sometimes you see Sankirtan warriors going out distributing in butcher shops to people who just, hacked up some body, and they have, blood all on their apron. But you see this, this devotee who went into the thick of it. And this is how merciful devotees are, is that they're reaching people at their lowest. Lord Chaitanya, who is like a tree, producing the most sacred fruit of devotional service, the only fruit that can actually be relished, and that is actually a remedial measure for the pangs that we feel in our desire for love above all. It's said that Lord Chaitanya, He's the tree itself, He is the fruit of this tree, and He's the gardener of this tree. And what He's doing with this Sankirtan movement that He has is He's enlisting others to help distribute this fruit of devotional service, of love in transcendental service to the Supreme Lord Himself. Kind of esoteric. But He's enlisting people. He's sharing the nectar of the preaching, the glories of the Sankirtan movement, the nectar of the holy name. Because what kind of pleasure is in it for Him if it's just Him by Himself, right? So He's rallying people together to go forward in His mission. And His mission's moving forward. It's just whether or not we want to be a part of it or not. It'll happen with or without us. There's no one so special enough to where if they don't join, if they don't participate, the movement won't happen. It's already been written, you could say. Prabhupada said that for the next 10,000 years, his books will be like law books, and one should study them so. So during the course of this time, we'll see, first of all, the material conditions degenerate. Despite all technological advances, we'll see people will become increasingly more aware of their unhappiness. They'll be more aware of the fact that there's nothing real sustainable for them, given the current status quo of their material enjoyment. So as the world around us darkens, the heart of the devotee is gold, and there's nothing more of a complementative backdrop to gold than darkness. So the heart of the devotee will shine very bright against this dark backdrop of Kali Yuga, and it'll be so clear. Right now there's still the element of illusion that people are enjoying, but things will progress to such a point to where it'll be so clear that they're not enjoying. When they can't find food, when they can't find water, when there's war, when there's all of these things that we hear about, right? This is a society of anxiety. It's an anxiety society. And that will only be more and more perpetuated. As it gets to such low and apparent states, it'll be so clear that what the devotees are doing is working, and that golden heart that shines in the devotee will be so attractive that everyone will just flock. And that will be the golden age. The claiming of all of these souls who are more or less the most fallen souls. That's who Lord Chaitanya is out to save. The impersonalists do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law, and it's actually the cause of our being here in the first place. Krishna bahir mukha hanya boga vancha kare. Meaning that it's because of the living entity's desire to enjoy as the Supreme Lord does, that he falls down into this world in the first place. It's due to that envy that one's pathway into the material world is made open and unrestricted. Prabhupada says that material energy or illusion, or in some cases he's even said Satan at that point captures the living entity, the soul, brings them down into this clouded, this foggy condition of material existence, where all knowledge is blocked by our own misunderstanding of our eternal reality, of our subordination to God's law. So unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality or to be fully engaged in his transcendental loving service with determination. Jai. Any comments, questions? If not, we'll keep reading. Yeah, go for it.
I was wondering if you had any comments on what it says in this verse, persons whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. So, how do we understand this in terms of many of us are coming into the temple, some of us live here full time, and at least for myself, it's hard for me. It's hard for me to imagine that I am freed from the duality of delusion or that all my sinful actions are completely eradicated. So, I'm just wondering if you have any comments on that in terms of how do we understand our position as neophytes, and are we engaging in devotional service despite still being in delusion?
Well, it's mentioned within this purport that the process, the Krishna conscious process, although not mandatory, is most always a gradual process. And as I'm sure we're familiar with to some extent, the 9 stages of devotional service, of which are not anarta nivritti, is the cleansing of the weeds, of the contamination from the heart. This happens after one has become initiated, after bhajana kriya, which is beginning to follow the instructions of the spiritual master. So there's kind of, it's called nishta bhajana kriya, and then there's another word. Essentially, when you get to nishta bhajana kriya, you become fixed. You've cleared your heart from such contamination, from such weeds that have been strangling that bhakti creeper, bhakti lata bij. So, it's a gradual process, and if we're not continually throwing water on the fire in the process of our purification, then it can actually be a quick process, moving through that stage of anarta nivritti. It's our desire, really, that culminates into whether or not we are moving quickly or slowly through that stage of purification. To the degree that we have material desires, correspondingly will we have, what's it called, like aversion to actually welcoming spiritual life, into us, into our heart. So one should carefully consider within their own mind, privately or with the help of a mentor or some external guidance, how much enjoyment, so-called enjoyment, am I actually deriving from material activity, from whatever it may be. One should be very honest with themselves, because if you're not honest with yourself, then you're not giving yourself a really good chance of moving quickly through that stage of anarta nivritti, is how I understand it now. Whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, this is this happens as a result to all people who surrender unto the Supreme Lord. As we hear in the 18th chapter, they become completely free from all reactions to their sinful activities. The Lord is the supreme pure. Like the sun, He can purify all without taking on those contaminants Himself. He's that powerful. Despite all of our wrongs, all of our contamination, it's not a match for the Lord. So, actually the whole progress, or the whole process of the morning program is, if we stick to that in proper consciousness, with some sort of understanding that we continue to develop of why we're doing the morning program, then we become purified. I mean, just walking around Tulsi Devi, purifies our sins. Every step we take in circumambulation around Tulsi Devi, it's relieving us from the sin as great as killing of a brahmana, which is pretty much as bad as it gets. Killing of a brahmana, yeah, just circumambulating Tulsi Devi. That's what it says in the song that we sing. So, I once asked this question. I was having trouble reconciling some of my past activity and feeling like I was so fallen that I could never get free from its reactions. And what came back to me from a very reputable source was that I'm actually not believing in the scripture when I voiced such a doubt like that. Because if I believed in the scripture, if I was taking it with full faith, then I wanted to have such... Actually, what I'm saying when I think that, I'm too fallen, is that I don't think... It's a cop-out, actually. It's a cop-out for me to continue doing that same sinful activity. And simultaneously, I'm recognizing that the Lord is someone who's not powerful enough to actually purify me. So the Lord can purify us immediately, given that's our desire, and our sincerity is there. But at least theoretically, we should take the scripture at face value for exactly what it says it is and how things are. And in that way, as we develop the realized knowledge, the vijñāna, we stay protected in our doing the program, in our remaining in the shower that's cleansing us. If we leave the shower before we're cleansed because we think it's taking too long to get clean, then, we miss out on the end result of actually doing what we set out to do in the first place, which is to get clean from all this lust and rust and dust that's in my heart. So, those are some thoughts. I don't know if I at all covered sufficiently what you... Is there anything else along that line? It's a nice question. I'm sure I missed a lot about it. Maharaj, if you're listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And Prabhu, if you have any comments or realizations. You raised your hand. Did you have something to say? You can make this a little public forum here for the last few minutes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, I just recollected when you're talking about the happiness in this material world. So, I think sometime back, Magadari Prabhu told an example, right? Let's say it's like chewing the chewed. So, you take a bubble gum. At first, you chew it. It might seem tasty, but once the juice within the bubble gum is over, even if you chew many number of times, it will not really make any sense. And what is happening now is we take out that bubble gum, put within the seat, someone else is taking that bubble gum, trying to chew. This was in the context of being in a movie theater and trying to enjoy. So he's taking someone else's bubble gum, trying to chew and get happiness out of it, but the taste itself is not there in that. So that's what. So the idea of Puna Charvati Charvananam, chewing the chewed, so that is considered as the fallacy of this material world.
Yeah, if we look to the acharyas and we see that actually everything is there, for us to hold out until it makes total sense for us, we can see that there's actually enough for me to get behind. There's such consistency in this philosophy that must be acknowledged, considered, and appreciated, and just continue appreciating process and the philosophy. And then within one's heart, as we become more inspired from the devotees around us, and more led from within by a super soul, then wonderful things start to happen. Purification starts. But it's like, we say this is a practical process, bhakti yoga. It's scientific, it's experimental, meaning you don't just take it on blind faith. Those who do, they don't last. They can't possibly. The material nature is so strong that they have to realize this. Truly, they have to realize it. So, going back to that, this is an experimental practice and process. If one takes to the experiment, but never really having the full components that were required, then how can they expect to get the desired result, right? So they might say, so they say is that chanting Hare Krishna is dynamic, it's transcendental, it never gets old, but when I chant Hare Krishna, I don't feel it, I'm done with it, I'm going to go try something else. That's because they weren't taking to the process with the proper components that it requires, which is submissive hearing, submissive chanting, understanding why we're doing the things that we're doing. So how can one actually be pleased with such a verdict that they might make, with such a false claim that's there? Because we see practical proof in the sadhus around us, right, and in the scripture. But especially along the lines of chanting, we see it in the sadhus that there are people who have actually taken to this process to chant Hare Krishna every day. They never get sick of it. And actually, so they say, is as they keep chanting, it just gets sweeter and sweeter. So chanting any other word that's not transcendental, that doesn't have that potency, it would surely get old, if not today, then tomorrow. Even just something as simple as that, we can see that, okay, there must be something here. I mean, I've been here for almost 1.5 years now, maybe a little over, and I'm chanting Hare Krishna every day. It kind of boggles my mind a bit. I have to understand there's actually something to that. I must be deriving some bit of taste, satisfaction, peace. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be doing this, waking up at 4 a.m. every day. But we can lose our enthusiasm just as nicely as it's come to us. So to be careful that we don't do that, we must continue to surround ourselves with devotees. As that's a point I'm just reiterating over and over tonight, it seems. Never a bad point to make. So I'll end it there, if that's okay with you. And if anyone has any comments, we can speak maybe later. It's okay. Thank you for listening very attentively and tolerating me as I stumble through Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees.